The first presentation is by Dr. Nikita Sharma, which is on the topic The Undertones of Monologue, a critical study of Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye.
Very
I
good morning to
invite,
everyone. Am I audible, ma'am?
yes, ma'am, please go
All
ahead with
right.
your presentation
Okay. Thank you so
and
much, ma'am.
please remember to stick to the time limit.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am. Yes, definitely, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. All right. A very good morning to everyone. And since we are having a paucity of time, so I'll be rushing a little bit, but I'll try to sum up everything. The title of my paper is The Undertones of Monologue, a critical study of Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. The organicity of the innumerable elements originates from the point of interaction that creates a moment of aesthetic. It is the purest form of self that is true to its origin. The concept of identity is organic as it is the most fundamental version of the self. The notion of identity in a being is achieved through the idea of self that recognizes and initiates action. It is the meaning of power that can be understood from the term monologue as it stands for the ideological state apparatus, ISAs, a term coined by Louis Althusser, who manages the working of a system and divides it into different binaries. They are present in the form or the figure of morality that sets the order of the system. It can be defined by the idea of right and wrong or black and white, and the final result is the authoritative stand that each being is said to follow. These elements, as we see in the world today, can be referred to as identity, for example, of a man and a woman in the system. The identity of a woman is often described in the books as it is in the origin of Eve, who is considered to be there through the Adam's rib, stating the order of organicity that lies in Adam. That means that the man is more capable, whereas the woman, who is often considered as the other gender, will always lack the originality. She is supposed to be a homemaker and a manager of household necessities. The vacancy to object or doubt the authority, which is not even present, and it is often considered not present in the women, as there is an innate realization of the absence of identity. The women, as a donated version created for Adam, is still a reality for many. A subsumed mannerism of living is what she subconsciously ascerned as a trajectory of choices for herself when her acts should be leading, but towards what? The benefit of the man, towards the benefit of the children she has brought to the world. The silent submission has led to a diminished sense of self, as there is no need to speak or rather communicate. The ability which is there with reference to communication is often considered as not even present in the women, but the ability to communicate with oneself and achieve this evolution is only possible, as Virginia Woolf has propounded in Pleading for a Room of One's Own, as it has been claimed that women never encountered this sense of self. They are passive. They are considered to be a construct who is supposed to be internally assumed as a natural behavior. Woolf discussed the need to be independent in terms of thought as well as livelihood, since it is not just a wish but an imminent request that is urgent. The acceptance of one's subjugation on the level of identity is the most dangerous assault that cannot be operated. The authority in the representation of a monologue has always been stated through the ways of life. It is the monologue that decides who has the vacancy to speak and who does not. The identity of a woman as a mere receptor was appreciated by the unacknowledged self who follows and cannot lead. A micro division of this voice of women are possibly assumed to be incapable of taking actions. The role of the women is merely execution of a well planned routine set up by the consideration which is with reference to the idea of finding a perfect match. If she simply cannot cook, this entire information with reference to her graduation, education, or any other enterprise that she might be capable of taking is given to the man who has, and it has been stated by the monologue that he can make a wise decision. It is this self that Woolf questions because, in order of things, the women tends to forget and forgive. The respective role of a mother, daughter, sister, and even wife have affiliations which offer a distinct manual requiring proper action. The vocabulary which all these policy makers, as well as the policies which they are defined, are all men. And the fixation on autonomy has often led to the doubt which is never uttered. The space of voice and its affiliation can be heard through the entire channel which is being communicated. It is through the folk tales, then converted into history books, then being taught as a classroom lesson, is the linear progression of words and worldview that has entirely stated that it is a process that the women needs to ascribe to. Such is the tone as said by Mrs. Breedlove, the mother of Piccola, a young child of African American origin in Tori Morrison's The Bluest Eye, who was abhorred by the identity of her own child. A mother's essence as a nurturer and protector of the child is diminished as she disapproves of her own offspring as ugly. The identity and the idealized version of a mother, or rather a woman who is disgusted by the birth of her child, is mentioned as, and I quote, head full of pretty hair, but Lord, she was ugly. Morrison 126 page number. It deciphers the connotations of beauty and its acceptance at the multifaceted levels of existence. The identity of a child is degenerated to the level of disgust. She is blamed for her beauty. She is considered as somebody who is not even idealistically considered to be a human. The sociological constraints regarding the identity of a woman and the diminishing of her stature on the concept of body were being considered as pretty, and it is something which is necessity as in terms of a dialogue. The branding of a body as instead of being a nurturer is necessary because in terms of the development of the self, it is the self which should initiate. Rather than finding a suitable bride for someone, namely Mr. Darcy, we should be questioning why this entire dialogue is never even stated. Piccola, a young child, was not even given an identity, and her entire voice throughout the entire episode or the chapterization is referred to as a mere sigh, confronted with the trauma of authority. Language being the first and the last structure of madness, as propounded by Michael Foucault in his book Madness and Civilization, has stated that it is the potential role of language in life and how it can have the ability to create or even destroy. The destruction that is possible with the level of language is something that every human entity needs to acquire. The role of the women is crucial since they hold no knowledge or in terms of the monopoly and have even forgetted the entire power that they have as an idealistic woman who is even considered to the level of godliness. They have the power to recreate, but in terms of the reality which we see, the notion of identity has been set by the established monologue that they define the system. The speech by Claudia, a classmate and friend of Piccola, have been stated where she recalled a version of Maureen, a light skinned colored classmate of the same school, has been stated as if she was cute and if anything could be believed, she was, then we were not. And what did that mean? We were lesser. The entire juxtaposition, if you can see, it highlights two elements stated as one is crucial and other is insignificant. The conversation that the child holds describe this established authority that is visible through this division of beauty. Piccola's admiration for beauty and her need to be accepted as beautiful stayed. It pushed her to the level of insanity where her need no longer remained as a childhood whim. The monologues are established since childhood and set a tone of authority as a figure of articulation as to what is right and who decides if something is wrong. Jacques Derrida hints at it when he talks about the need for aporia, the gaps that can set the motion for elements to be in continuum. The example of a teacher in the classroom is cited as to be crucial in order to balance the order. But the task of authority, even if it is doubted, still remain established as the monologue is questioned again and again. In the book, it's been stated the noises were hollow, but the threats they implied were not, referring to the harshness of reality that cannot be without a direct indication. Still, affiliate and affectionate towards authority will remain so. The sight of Piccola towards the end become unbearable as she was impregnated with the stigmas instigated on her along with the fatherless child that she conceived. Thus, to conclude, to acquire a potential thread of change, or even if to urge for it, it is to understand the hidden undertones of the monologue and why it is established. The institutionalization of the concept of identity remains to be questioned as the stigma of being abhorrent stayed. Equality, in terms of the organic being, is the necessity. And to balance the order of thing and to celebrate the agency of the women, we need to initiate it. It is the narrative that needs to be acknowledged. The awakening is only possible with the smallest unit in the system recognizing the necessity of thought and the need to speak. It is required in the stature of the women, or else they will always be appropriated for the sigh they never uttered. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikita. It was a wonderful presentation, and it definitely spoke about what needs to be done rather than what has already been focused or presented in the novel itself. So it takes us one step further into the realm of action rather than delving or just focusing on what has Toni Morrison tried to say in through the character of Piccola. Okay, it was a wonderful and commendable presentation, and
Thank you,
I
ma'am.
would now on to the next presenter for the session. It is Neela Rajiv from St. Thomas College, Thrissur, with a presentation on Women Transformed into Goddesses, a representation of women in Kottaril Sanpunni's Aithyamala.
Okay, so am I audible now?
Yes, you are. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, so good afternoon, all. Kerala modernity, which resulted in the territorialization of the region, was emblematic in reimagining the lives of women in Kerala. The reform laws, education, political agitations, and cultural productions of the period played a significant role in the construction of gender. Renaissance ideas, along with the burgeoning print culture, awakened a social consciousness among the people. The period under consideration for the study begins in the early years of the 19th century and ends with the final decade of the 20th century. This paper further analyzes the construction of gender in the cultural context of Kerala. The Kerala Brahmins were the highest caste in the social structure of Kerala. Though it was the highest caste, the patriarchal structure of the society oppressed the life of the Nambudiri women with its rigid customs and traditions. They were confined within the claustrophobic spaces of their illam. Marriage as a social institution enforced stringent rules of matrimony. The marriages were not performed out of love, but only as a part of social obligation. Only the elder brother of a family was able to marry legally within another Brahmin community. He could marry up to 4 women from his own caste. All the other members had to be satisfied with Sambandham. In this practice of Sambandham, the younger ones of the family could consort with women from the Nayar or Ambalavasi community. It was in April 1925 the Legislative Council passed a bill terminating matrilineal system, permitting partition of property, legalizing all sambandhams, and essentially inaugurating the age of the patriarchal family structure in Travancore. The bill was sent to the Maharani for her assent, and on 13th April 1925, she signed the historic Nayar Regulation Act, giving matrilineal kinship the unique distinction of being the only system of inheritance. The dowry system was also prevalent among the Nambudiris of the state. And the new Malayali woman was molded by the patriarchy under the influence of colonial modernity. The educated middle class of India imbibed the ideals of colonial modernity and they wanted to reform the outdated practices within their communities. So, modern definitions of female sexuality in Kerala were shaped by the reform laws of land and marriage implemented by the colonial government. The marriage laws that redefined the kinship structure of the state from matrilineal to patrilineal were the cultural production of a new morality than legal infringements, as observed by G. Arunima. The legal reforms brought by the colonial modernity has thus transformed the kinship structure of Kerala. It is within this familial setting that sexuality of the modern women got reimagined. Monogamy became the new norm under colonial morality. As a result of the transition from matrilineal to patrilineal system, the male became head of the family, replacing the figure of the Karanavan or the elder family member of the Taravada. The role of the women was confined to the realm of a domestic space headed by a man. The educational reforms that took place in the early 18th and 19th century created a new social order. Even though women were educated, she was not able to break the shackles of patriarchy. In this system, women were relegated to the status of the other, whereas men were allowed to pursue their intellectual domain of knowledge. The notions of motherhood and ideal women were thrust upon her. The sexualization of the female body had further reaching consequences in the cultural space of Kerala. Only the upper caste women were allowed to cover their breasts till then. Shanar women of South Travancore started a rebellion for the right to wear upper clothes over their bosoms. This agitated the upper caste members who attacked some of the women who covered their upper part of the body. This led to a widespread revolt and as a result, on 26 July 1859, the King of Travancore uh, announced the right of Shanar women to cover their breast. As a result of this proclamation, women from all castes started covering their breasts. Thus, the right to cover the body was exhorted as a powerful political statement that redefined female sexuality. Women's sexuality came to be feared in the new social system. Subjugating the desires of the female became an important dictate of patriarchy. Lalitambika Andarjana mocks this tendency of the male dominated society to confine a woman into either as a saint or as a prostitute. Myths and legends were the tools of oppression that carried out this religious agenda of denigrating women by trying to confine her into the ideations of patriarchy. In Aidihimala, the representation of gender is problematic. Kottarathal Shankuni had broadly classified the women in the text into that of a divine and diabolic nature. The ideal feminine in Aidihimala is attributed to the qualities of chastity, honor, obedience, meekness, etc. Anything outside this pattern was branded as the other. Therefore, the representation of women in the text need to be read by placing them in the socio-cultural milieu of the construction of feminine in the Kerala history. Himalayan legends are full of reconciled information about social practices, customs, and traditions of the past, familial and ritual status of women, and the complex circulation of land rights. In Himalayan stories, Shanguni documents the origin stories of various goddesses, the voluptuous Ekshis, and the other noble women from the royal families. In the former category, the author mentions about goddesses connected to a particular place. He also describes pious women being elevated into the status of a goddess and the tale of chaste women attaining divinity. The legends of many goddesses like Maka Bhagavati, etc., is about the virtuous women being transformed into goddesses. The text gives an account of the legends of the women who belong to the royal dynasty, such as the Queen of Kaipura, the Queen of Shambhagasheri, etc. These tales, which are replete with eulogies for the ruling class, in turn depict Shankuni's sycophancy. In the legends of Arakal Bibi, she is presented as a Hindu princess who embraced Islam to respect tradition, and she started a new dynasty in order to resolve a crisis with justice. In the tales of goddesses like Kumaranallur Bhagavati, she is depicted as an incarnation of Madhura Meenakshi in the Pandya kingdom. The goddess had left her abode and migrated to a new place, fleeing the socio-political turmoils of the kingdom. In Aidihimala, the manifestation of goddesses could be seen in stone, pond, well, etc., waiting to be discovered and consecrated into power. There are goddesses of disease and cure as well in Aidihimala. And in the legends of the divine women in Aidihimala, one can find many recurring motifs and incidents which point to the hegemonic caste structures that existed in Kerala. The idol of the goddesses, which lies in a desolate place, will usually be found by a lower caste woman. Sometimes the idol manifests in the form of a stone that starts bleeding, but a lower caste man or woman sharpens their sickle on it. Then the goddesses will immediately demand purification since she was polluted by the touch of a lower caste woman. The emissary of the goddess, that is the Velichapada, will communicate the demand of the goddess to the people assembled there. Immediately, a Brahmin priest will arrive and perform rituals to sanctify her into a newly constructed temple. Once she is consecrated into the temple, the lower caste woman who discovered her idol would be denied the entry. So it was only after the Temple Proclamation Act of Tiruvidankur in 1936 that the untouchable had access to temple premises. Temples of Kerala had acquired immense wealth and the control of Brahmins. In most of temples in Shankuni, Saidi, Himala, the Brahmins were the priests and the priesthood had long been a male privilege. There are several incidents in Himala where the goddesses demand land, gold, and elephant through their oracles. Diseases and famines were seen as a punishment from the angry and discontent goddess. For redemption and exoneration, the mysterious emissaries of the goddesses claim valuable gifts. The goddess will not be appeased until her demands are fulfilled. Himala stories reveal the goddesses as a mother figure who is benevolent to her devotees, grant their wishes, and protect them from the ire and vengeance of ruling class. Women in pre-modern Kerala had to suffer from the tripartite structures of oppression in the form of caste, class, and gender. They existed in the margins of the familial and social structure. The lives of the women illustrate their miserable plight in the society. Even though the modernization projects of the social reforms and missionaries of the early 20th century resulted in challenging the caste system of society, but it couldn't liberate women from the fetters of patriarchy. The women's sexuality came to be feared in Kerala society. The Ekshi narratives of Kerala are constructed around the patriarchy's fear over the sexuality of the woman. The Ekshi was symbolic of any woman who wouldn't conform to these ideals projected by modernity and religion. The Ekshi who became an object or the other was feared for her sexuality and the power she wielded over men. When patriarchy controls the woman, movement of women, Ekshi moves on her free will. Ekshi, with her excessive sexual energy, challenged the practice of monogamy evolved from Christian morality by seducing a large number of men. Thus, the practices that are employed to tame the Ikshi again symbolize the policing of patriarchy and religion over the female body. The Ikshi trope in Kerala had its roots in Buddhism and Jainism. Ikshis in Buddhism were symbols of motherhood, fertility, and femininity. The Ikshi worship that was seen in the later Buddhist Jain cultures underwent transformative changes during Hindu revivalism. The Ikshis in Naidi Himala exhibit a behavioral pattern of monstrosity. They reveal these contesting spirits of celibacy and sexuality in them. Passages that praise the external beauty of the Ikshis were common in these tales. The trope of Ikshi is wide against the power structures of patriarchy. The myth of the Ikshi could be juxtaposed with the plight of women in Kerala, who lost their identities and was tamed by the patriarchy being nothing but meek and fragile women. A process of othering happens with the Ikshi. She stands contradictory to the concept of ideal woman. Anything that was seen outside the norms of normalcy was ostracized. The Ikshi can be seen as a prototype of a liberated female who is treated as a perennial symbol of haunting and seduction. She was seen as a libertine and an enchantress who asked for lime for her betel nut to the passengers at night. Throughout these myths, she is either beaten up or nailed down. She is tamed by the patriarchal ideology of driving an iron nail into her head or by capturing her soul and then nailing it into the pala tree. The legends of Ikshi interpolate the hegemonic patriarchal notions of femininity and female sexuality. The transition of the Ikshi from the female fertility goddess in pre-Vedic times to celestial beings with enormous passion in Aidi Himala has been discussed in this section. She is the other, the binary of the ideal Malayali woman or Kulastri. This can be read
Ma'am,
only with the
I would
social.
like to interrupt.
Yes, ma'am.
Please try to wind up within 1 or 2 minutes.
Conclude.
The time
Yeah,
of your
sure, sure,
paper.
sure, sure.
Thank you so much.
Okay. This can be read only with the social and cultural condition of women, especially of the Nambudiri women in the historic junction of Kerala modernity. So, in order to conclude, this paper analyzes the representation of women, which are further diversified into Ikshis and goddesses in Naidi Himala, and how it corresponds to the development of Kerala modernity. The stories of the goddess, the Ikshi, and other women in Naidi Himala texts gives glimpses of the society, customs, and modalities of temple administration. We also get certain clues about the social distribution of land, wealth, caste, and gender roles in erstwhile Kerala. The concept of ideal woman had been constructed in Kerala to meet the expectations of patriarchy. Anything that flouts the conformist tradition was branded as other. This might have resulted in the categorization of women into either a divine or diabolic status. Thank you.
Thank you, Neela. Your paper is packed with an interesting amount of history, good facts, and I'm really looking forward to read the entire paper once
Thank
it's
you.
published.
Thank you. Thank you.
And since we are having some paucity of time, so I'll straight away delve into the next paper and invite Pallavi Kanwar from JNU Delhi to present her paper on locating the femme fatale in contemporary Indian English crime fiction, reading The Girl from the Non-Grim Hills. And I would like to stress once more on, the importance of keeping the time limit because we're running really behind schedule. Thank you, Pallavi. You can go on.
Thank you, ma'am. A very good morning to you all. The title of my paper is Locating the Femme Fatale in Contemporary Indian English Crime Fiction, Reading the Girl from Longrim Hills. Now, before delving into the paper, I would like to say how I have structured the paper. So, within the genre of the crime fiction, the Indian English crime fiction has proliferated in the past 3 decades. And within that, there is a new crop of writing emerging from the northeastern part of India, which is critics have also called it the Shillong canon or the Northeast Indian English canon. And my text, the novel The Girl from Longrim Hills by Ankush Saikia, published in 2013, is located very specially in that part of Northeast and within that genre. So without further ado, let me delve into the paper. The genre of crime writing and fiction has existed from a very long time, but according to Worthington, It was in the 19th and 20th century only that the crime fiction developed into a recognizable literary genre. And the larger genre includes in itself various subgenres such as detective fiction, mystery, thriller, police procedural, hardboiled, noir, etc. So the novel that I'm going to discuss today is a thriller and also brings in characteristics of hardboiled fiction and noir fiction. Initially read as cautionary tales against subversion and transgression, present literary studies interpret text from the genre to explore embedded ideas of culture, philosophy, psychology, etc. Crime writing as a specific genre of literature has enjoyed its pride of place in the discourse of Indian writing in English, arguably since the 19th century, and there is a renewed vigor with which it has been studied now. And coming back to the matter of the Northeast Indian English literature, as an independent branch of critical and theoretical inquiry, the literary academic discipline of Northeastern Indian writing in English has emerged in the 21st century to reach wider and delve deeper into the specific experience of Northeast. Geographically peripheral to the Northeast, to the national mainland, the Northeastern states have historically been witness to various political upheavals intensified after India's independence. The struggles of identity assertion, reservation of ethnic individuality, land rights, citizenship rights, political autonomy, etc., have been at the core of many separatist guerrilla struggles led by the different armed insurgent groups by the region. By the 1990s, most of these groups have been legally declared terrorist organizations, and the military control to calm their activities in the region increased manifold. And some of these control measures included draconian military laws like ASFA, the Armed Forces Special Power Act. These laws and all these pervasive military presence in the region have resulted in various acts of human rights violation, including extrajudicial killings, rape, unlawful detention, etc. Now, it is very important to contextualize our text, The Girl from Nonglim Hills, within this political and historical context, because that text is although does not directly refer to these ideas and does not directly refer to these histories, our character, the protagonist Bok, and the femme fatale character Christine is very deeply affected by these phenomena at the background of the novel. Evidently, these concerns have influenced the contemporary literature emerging from these states, and Ankush Shoikia's novel, The Girl from Nongrim Hills, is firmly located in the quaint but commercialized northeastern town of Shillong in the state of Meghalaya. The novel is a fast-paced narrative of local politics, crime, and insurgency. There is a new crop of promising writers whose fictions have been rooted in the erstwhile colonial capital of the undivided Assam, and which writer-filmmaker Avner Perrier terms the text as belonging to the quote-unquote Shillong canon. Ankush Shoikia writes how, and I quote, Shillong has a unique mix of elements: old colonial, plain Indian, tribal, people from the rest of Northeast, a love of music and football, a bit of xenophobia that makes it a very interesting city for a writer. Despite it being one of the most enduring tropes of crime literature, the figure of the femme fatale has been represented as reaching beyond the confines of the category in this present text. I will explain later on how. The writer, Ankush Shoikia, has situated the novel and the character of the femme fatale, the female seductress, within and beyond the structure of the genre. The text has familiar motifs of crime noir with the amateur detective and the hypersexualized and morally ambiguous femme fatale. The plot involves a world of slow corruption and decay going hand in hand with militancy, guns, politicians, mining mafia, rock bands, and extortionists. The protagonist of the novel, Bok, is a lead guitarist in a band leading a slow-paced life until suddenly he was forced to enter the world of gun smuggling, extortion when his brother was swindled out of money in a failed arms deal. To save his brother's life from a revengeful insurgent, Bok had to somehow collect 50 lakhs within a week. And although nearly impossible feat, Bok gets roped into the mission of stealing the money from a couple of corrupt politicians by the enigmatic Christine, the character of the femme fatale in the text. The ethnicity and the identity of Christine is shrouded in mystery. When they are physically intimate, Bok notices a marks of an old wound on one of her thighs. and wonders why she got it from, and she replies with a vague, and I quote, "Some man did it to me." This strangely draws Bok more in, as suggested by some unknown violence that has, befallen her. Characteristic of the noir genre, the novel depicts the all-pervading corruption engulfing the region, such as the politician, industrialist, militant nexus, police corruption, military atrocities, compromised rebel outfits, etc. Money, lust, and all other hedonistic pursuits guide the impulses of the characters involved in a noir setting. The setting is often in the noir novel, and the setting is often bleak and nihilistic. Author and academic Megan Abbott writes how in noir everyone is fallen, and right and wrong are not clearly defined, maybe not even attainable. The rainy, cold Shillong, with its trendy cafes, rock music, and scenic resorts on the surface, and the corrupt and dark underbelly of coal mafia and armed insurgency, becomes the perfect setting of the novel. Most of the pivotal characters are grey, with their motives and intentions and questions of their redemption left for the readers to judge. Box, the male character's seemingly quiet life is tossed into disruption the moment he is approached by Christine. There are multiple narratives suggested regarding her past. She tells, and they are contradictory as well. She tells Bok how she followed her lover, and I quote, "I was a revolutionary, or at least I thought I was a revolutionary. We were in love, he joined a movement, and I followed." She's talking about her husband, and she says that he followed her husband into armed struggle insurgency. However, this narrative differs from the original official records for the police records, because in the police records the police says that she was actually abducted by a rival armed group, and she was tortured for extorting information regarding her own rebel group. So there are contradictory narratives regarding as to her origin. However, he cannot, the Bok, even though Bok is initially lured by her, and initial infatuation and desire for her turns into hatred as she dupes him and attempts to kill him. However, he cannot detach himself emotionally from her physical allure and has to rationally remain stoic every time he feels drawn towards her. Now, coming to the topic of the femme fatale, Patrick Bates' 1979 book, Femme Fatale, Images of Evil and Fascinating Women, traces the trope of sexually vivacious women who were considered fatales in ancient Christian and Greek mythologies, with characters like Eve, Pandora, and Salome, etc. He opines that in the 19th century art and literature, there was a revival of these figures, and these representations were stemming from a deep-rooted misogyny, a fear and vilification of women who asserted their sexuality and were fantasized about. In the novel, Christine is also depicted as this sexually deviant woman out of corrupt and morality of men, and whereas Daisy, who is Bok's socially accepted love interest, is portrayed as a virginal angel of the house character. Bok himself contrasts these women as, and I quote, "the Madonna and the whore, the two primal archetypes of women." It is no wonder that the late 19th century preoccupation with the figure of the mysterious femme fatale coincided with that of the solidification and canonization of the crime fiction as an accepted literary genre. Steve Simkins' book, Cultural Construction of the Femme Fatale, charts out the various literary and historical references to the idea of the femme fatale and goes on to relate it to female criminality with specific case studies in the real world. Simkin too critiques the undertones of misogyny embedded in the trope and attributes it to the male writer's fantasy and fear of female sexuality. At the intervention of female writers, however, the portrayal of the femme fatale has started to become more nuanced. And I quote, "A new type of story is being told about the femme fatale, a story that explores why she commits violent crimes and exposes the source of her anger that often fuels her crimes." The critical lens now have moved towards the question of why a character is moved to commit such acts rather than the voyeuristic and titillating process of seduction and subjugation. In the novel, the reader can see how Christine dreams of escaping the drudgery of her existence, as well as the place which made her into a criminal pariah, feeding on the debt and extortion. She dangles these dreams of escaping to Bangkok or to Goa to different men like Bok and Tenzing, and apart from serving as baits, these conversations give a peek into her character and her desire to escape her lived reality. There is a strong suggestion that she has been raped and tortured in either, it can be either in a military camp or it can be either in a rebel camp. The story is actually not known and is open ended, and the reader is left to actually wonder what actually happened, what actually are the motives for her. Um,
Thank
Here
you.
the intention of the
I said,
ma'am,
have you rounded up everything?
ma'am, just 1 minute, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, so here the intention of the figure of the femme fatale is driven by motives of forced circumstances rather than intentionality. And Christine retains her agency through self-assertion and breaking into the male-dominated world of corruption and criminality. So that we can see this shift in the critical gaze as well as fictional portraits of the female criminality has heralded an era where the trope of the femme fatale has gained a more nuanced portrayal rather than being just sexualized object used by artists in their work to titillate and scandalize the audience. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am, for the extra time. Thank you.
It's a very interesting topic since I'm partial to mysteries, thrillers, and slasher novels. So it really, resonated with me, and it's a good publicity for the novel itself. Congratulations. And
Yeah.
now I will call upon Sagarika Kokoti from Sonapur, Assam, for her paper presentation on matrimony, marriage, and marital rape, a reading through Sashi Deshpande's The Intrusion. Please go ahead with your presentation. And since we are running behind schedule, I'm again stressing, please try to wind up before time rather than, letting me interrupt. Thank you so
Sure.
much.
Yeah. Okay, ma'am. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Sagarika, and the topic of my paper is matrimony, marriage, and marital rape. A reading through Shashi Deshpande's The Intrusion, and this is a kind of organization of my presentation. So Shashi Deshpande is an Indian novelist, and her short story, The Intrusion, belongs to the collection of short stories, The Intrusion and Other Stories. It actually revolves around the consent of a woman who was not really heard, by neither by the parents nor by her husband. And eventually, we see how her husband intrudes into her privacy, and she cannot really protect herself from the intrusion into her body. So when we talk about marriage, in Indian society, we have always seen marriage as a very important social institution. And there are many authors who have actually talked about marriage in their kind of writings, but something like marital rape is, not really, discussed in many of the writers. And in this particular kind of story, we see that the narrator, who is not given an identity or a name rather, so her husband is very excited about the kind of intimacy they are going to have after marriage, or the kind of domination or the authority that he will get over the body of his wife after marriage. But on the other hand, we see the narrator who is not really mentally prepared. The physical hunger in the husband makes him go against his wife's will to fulfill his lust. So during the act of intrusion, we find how this particular narrator, she feels, it's not only about the physical pain, but also about the pain of losing one's dignity. And this particular story, we can see that how the author Shashi Deshpande actually voices out the domestic issue of marital rape. So this paper actually examines the theme of individual right and freedom, and available to women both before and after marriage in an Indian scenario. And it also examines the silence. So this paper particularly studies the silence of the narrator in many of the situations, and it also tries to understand the vulnerable position of a woman, in quote unquote arranged marriage, where really, the idea of the consent, it really doesn't matter. So we are basically doing a very close textual analysis and of the selected story. And as I have already mentioned, the story begins with a trip. The narrator, along with her husband, they crosses a fishing village and goes to a top of the steep uphill. And when they arrive, or when they reach at their destination, we see, rather than feeling happy, she feels very awkward. I quote, a painful silence and embarrassment that occurs between two people who scarcely know each other, and I wondered wildly, desperately, what we could talk about. So she was completely blank because she felt she was with some stranger. And her state of emotion does not really bother her husband. He excitingly changes his dress. On the other hand, she feels low and lonely. She sits quietly for a while and then, dashes to the veranda. She wishes to be anywhere in the world except in a strange place. And I quote, complete privacy. The husband said that we have now the complete privacy. And he smiled, emphasizing the words, and I felt suddenly completely sickened. He went on, unaware of my feelings. So there is this gap, the kind of, the husband who is not really concerned or, bothered about what the wife is actually feeling or how is she feeling. Uh, and then her words were in her thoughts. But most of the times we see that she chooses silence over words, fears, tremors. I quote, the way I averted my face from beds, the sheets looked grubby and pillow covers disgustingly greasy. Tell the man to change the covers and sheets. I wanted to say, but could not. So there were many things she really wanted to convey, but there was something that was stopping her from sharing her feelings or speaking her mind out. There are many such instances in the story where we find the unnamed narrator choosing silence over words. This silence, although apparently looks like resistance from her part, is always overlooked, and not only by her husband, even by her own parents. They took it for granted. She was taken for granted, although she was an educated modern woman. But then when it comes to decision making, maybe she was not entitled to make her decisions, or maybe make decisions for herself or for her life. And many a times, when even though she tried to speak, there are instances where she was just unheard. And I'm again quoting, this is the husband's mother when they were searching for a perfect match. We are looking for a girl, simple but sophisticated. His mother said, my son is working in a foreign company. His wife must be able to entertain and mix with foreigners. So the mother had conditions like this. These are the prerequisites for the marriage. She had made the word foreigner sound like merchants. Simple and sophisticated. Was I that? I wondered. No one had asked me if I had agreed. It had been taken for granted. So this is the feeling of a girl who really could not convey her own feelings to even before marriage to her parents, or she was not able to convince. She was not ready for the marriage, and her uneasiness grew as she realized, quote, and at present we were not friends, not acquaintances even, but only a husband and wife. So they were just a husband and a wife, neither friends nor acquaintances. And this is the dilemma of someone who is forced, or maybe who is suddenly made to take a decision, and within 1 or 2 months the marriage was planned, and it was executed, and then she did not have a clue about anything, especially the person who became her husband but remained a stranger till this time. And it was their honeymoon. So the fact that her husband was not at all concerned about her desire and expectations makes him an insensible human being. In the narrator's words, how unaware he was of everything but of what was to happen between us, making us truly husband and wife. When we were, I thought again, not even acquainted with each other. A month back, we had not even heard of each other, so did not even know each other.
The narrator once again chooses to remain silent when the husband tries to initiate some intimacy, and she realizes, I could not say none of these things to him. Even if I did, I thought, looking at his face, he would not hear me. So she knew that she will remain unheard. And although the husband was keen on it, she was trying to escape and avoid the situation. And then, she was really trying to avoid that, intimate, kind of, time where, she really felt, because she was angry, she was hurt. We scarcely know each other, I stammered at last. He seemed kind of, flabbergasted. Know each other? What has to do with it? Aren't we married now? So the license, they got, maybe for the husband, he thought that just because she has become his wife, he can do anything. If, her consent really doesn't matter. I want to know all about you. I wanted to see. So this is something, again, we see that, throughout the story, the narrator, the story itself is in her thought. And she is thinking, she is kind of, trying to figure out things inside her mind. But then when it comes to words, expression, she is always lacking that, ability to speak. Or maybe she was not assertive, but then in her mind, she knew that whatever was happening, it was not correct. And towards the end of the story, we observe the act of intrusion as her husband forced himself on her without her consent. And she says, and the cry I gave was not for the physical pain, but for the intrusion into my privacy, the violation of my right to myself. And she was aware of everything, but the only problem was that she was not able to, maybe, again, even if she, said no for the marriage, the father who emotionally blackmailed her, saying that I have two more sisters.
And just wind up, give me the
Yes,
crux of that.
yes,
Give me the
ma'am.
crux of the argument and let us finish because the next chairperson might be online.
Oh, okay,
Thank
okay,
you.
ma'am. Just 1 minute, ma'am. So, in conclusion, we see that the narrator is trying to keep her distance from her husband, but then she was not really given, or she's not empowered. So, and eventually, the idea of the marital rape, or the kind of intrusion into her body. If we consider body as a space, there was intrusion into her body, and in this particular story, we have very, nicely, we see how Shashi Deshpande tries to kind of portray, the women, not giving her a name or an identity, is something that we can understand it as, she represents all the women who go through this kind of, violation, or who have to experience, and their plight remains unseen and unheard most of the times. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excuse
It's a
me,
very
ma'am, I'm first
sensitive.
presenter. I am present. Actually, I was trying to connect, but due to technical issues, I was unable to. My name is Dr. Mohammad Saqib Abrar.
Sir, you're not in this room. I think you have entered the wrong room.
No, ma'am, I am in this very room. My name is there in the list, first one.
Okay,
Dr.
we have
Mohammad
one
Saqib
more
Abrar.
presenter for the technical session too, sir. It's been going on. It's been like a bit delayed. So I'll just ask you to wait for 5 more minutes so that we can finish our first session. Then I'll hand over the charge to the other chairperson. Thank you so much.
Sorry, ma'am.
So I call upon Shraddha Subha
Yes,
for the
ma'am.
last presentation of the
Hello.
technical session 2, which is Manjushri Thapa's All of Us in Our Own Lives, Role and Places of Women.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible? Hello? Hello, ma'am.
Yes, you are audible.
Hello, hello.
Please try
I
to
can
wind
hear
up
you.
as quickly as possible so that we can hand over the mic to the next chairperson.
Okay, ma'am.
The previous session is going on, ma'am.
Yes, sir, the previous session has been delayed.
Okay, ma'am. It's not from 12 to 1 session. Okay.
So it is the 12 to 1 session, but I mean, right now we are extending the 11 to 12 for 5 minutes or so, maybe.
Okay.
I'll ask you to be patient for a
Okay,
while.
ma'am. Then in the next slot I'll be. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, hello, ma'am. Ma'am, is it visible?
Your screen is not visible. Are you trying to share your screen?
Yes, ma'am.
It's not visible as yet. Please try once more.
Hello, everybody. I hope you are fine. I'm sorry I'm late. My connection and the computer are having a lot of issue here. So sorry.
Yes, hello, ma'am.
Yes, it's visible now, Shraddha. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Today, my presentation is on Manjushri Thapa's All of Us in Our Own Lives, Role and Places of Women. It was first published in India in the year 2016 by Albu Company. In the book, Manjushri Thapa has used various techniques to criticize certain groups of individuals of the Nepali society. The target of criticism is about the socio-political issues such as hierarchy, class division, and patriarchy within the Nepali household. Thapa's narratives bear witness to the experiences of the Nepalese in their day-to-day life, conflicts and tensions in their changing society. So the paper focuses on the aspects of the issues that are relevant to the contemporary Nepali woman of Nepal and the status within the society. It highlights the voice which was and is still suppressed under patriarchal society. It highlights everyday life in circumstances of changes, corruption, sexism, isolation, disconnection, and culture expectation. Encourage women in fulfilling responsibility toward themselves and their society. Gender or cultural inequities from the nation Nepal are not new, but these have not been in the limelight in critical discussions till date. The paper will be dealing on the given subtopics. These are the overviews which I will be dealing on. Moving on to the next slide. In the book, Thapa examines the emergence of New Nepal and the concept of representation in contemporary democratic thought. By using personal narration and dialogical form in her works, Thapa has created a real account and provides evidence through her skills. The accounts of the socio-political situation, including the devastating earthquake of 2015 and the subsequent drafting of a new constitution, are reflected at the backdrop of the story as well. So, All of Us in Our Own Lives is a work of fiction by Manjushri Thapa. The book is woman-centric, in which Thapa has thrown light on the status of Nepali women and how they are treated. And it is an encounter between strangers, especially women from different backgrounds. It is a quest for identity with reference to repressed gender, and the women characters are marginalized, self-caught in the maze of an age-old traditional beliefs and patriarchy. Thapa has written the book with great intensity and insight, giving the contemporary Nepali writing in English a whole new beginning in contemporary era. It portrayed strong women characters like Ava Beridin, Indira Sharma, Sapna Karki, Durga, and others. Literature has therefore played a crucial role in introducing the identity of peoples to larger audiences. Thapa's writings, whether they are fiction or non-fiction, she has incorporated the facts and realities that Nepal has gone through. Her works are, in a way, an eye-opening for readers who seek to gain knowledge about Nepal and its people. Here I quote, one of the most cherished beliefs of English teachers is that literature does something to people. The power of literature to affect people's lives for good or for ill has been accepted with little supporting evidence since the time of Plato and Aristotle. In the book, it is seen that unlike other mainstream writers, Manjushri Thapa uses certain methods to convey message of unity and open-mindedness despite the diverse ethnicities of in Nepal. Her intellectual career in many ways has mounted upon a significant contribution to the introduction of Nepali society to the world. Being a diasporic writer, Manjushri Thapa becomes a spokesperson for the Nepali mosaic, and she writes with compassion about Nepali minorities within the nation as well as Nepali migrants from different parts of the world. Her characters struggle for some kind of freedom and happiness under the weight of tradition, culture, and society. She indicates and demonstrates her works with the realities which are happening and had happened in the past. Manjushri Thapa's representation of Nepal through her works has therefore given her fame and respect throughout the globe. Manjushri Thapa has been writing regularly in the print media in Nepal and also translated Nepali literature into English. And some of our works which have been published, they are published in Kantipur, the Kathmandu Post, Himal South Asian, London Review of Books, Newsweek, and others. Yeah, moving on to the next slide. Religion and tradition, means of women's oppression. So Nepal is a country in which there are multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multilingual people settled together. They follow different forms of rites and rituals, wear different traditional dresses, indulge in different food habits and lifestyles. As religion and tradition plays a pivotal role in most of the communities, so as to the Nepali society of who they are and who they have become in the present days. So it is always women who suffers and are expected to follow the rules and regulation from decades. Thapa's main concerns and sympathies are towards the unheard and suppressed voices. The constitution prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, but still the position of women remains unequal. Here I quote Deepika V. Kolambe from New Men, International Journal of Multidisciplinary. Her book about Manjushri Thapa by saying that her books have its light, humorous moments, but underneath them, she shows her care for people, their joys and their pain. Thus, countries adopt the changes, but larger challenges of individuals. In the book, the suppressed fear of gender disparities can be seen from one of the characters, Indira Sharma. Manjushri Thapa has presented that women of Nepal, despite being independent and educated, are still stuck in the age-old tradition and societal norms that are expected from the society. Indira Sharma, who is one of the leading gender experts from Nepal, Kathmandu, in the story, she is the most intriguing character who is placed firmly in the men's world and at work and at home. She portrays women of contemporary Nepal and represent every developing country's women who have evolved more rapidly than the men folk. The one who took advantage of her emotional instability and her rights as a human being can be termed as men and society in general. Here I quote from the text regarding Indira
I
Sharma.
would like to skip the quotes and just give me the crux
Yes,
of
yes.
the
Okay, ma'am. Okay. I will move on to the
Thank you.
next slide. Talking about
Try to
one
wind
of the
this minute.
talking about Ava Beridin, she's one of the other woman character, a Canadian lawyer who quits her job in Start and Aid project as a director of women's empowerment program in Nepal from Toronto in the story. Instead of going back from her past, Ava actually works for the upliftment and equality of people whose voice were unheard by the government and the laws. From the very beginning of the Nepali society, certain realities and events were created to transform Nepali culture by the so-called traditional Hindu elite of Nepal. This is the patriarchy and workplace hierarchy. At top of this, the monarch was the power and authority with the emergence of hierarchies and suppressions within Nepali society. Still now, Nepal is ruled directly or indirectly by the patriarchal Hindu elite of the society in the name of democracy. To a large degree, Ava and Indira, both the women characters, have always had a certain power over the co-workers, being in a high rank in the organization. But as the story goes on, workplace inequality and gender discrimination become evident gradually. The workplace soon becomes masculine, in which the women are looked down. Nepali women and power. So in power in the Nepali society dated back from the rule of monarchs, the age
Like
of
you to conclude within
okay.
two lines, 3 lines at most.
Okay, ma'am. So Thapa's contemporary women characters are, on the other hand, women who are not afraid to move on or to move forward and follow their own dreams. So the title, All of Us in Our Own Life, manifests Ava's and Indira's spirit in handling their organization in order to put together the lives of people who are in need of and help and support them. So, uh, yes, I will conclude, ma'am. So Thapa's critical approach to the patriarchal system of Nepali society and her cynical view of the society in general highlights what Nepal have become in contemporary times. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Due to the shortage of time and because we have overstepped the time limit by a good 20 minutes or so,
Yes,
we're not
ma'am.
able to give you good time.
Okay,
But
ma'am. Thank you.
I think in all we got the gist of what you wanted to say.